I started out as a clinical psychologist several years ago, and most of my work has been on the individual patient who suffered from some type of psychopathology, and the interventions were one-on-one interventions. Over time, I realized that actually for many older people, it's not the individual psychopathology that matters, but what's more important is societal attitudes, feelings, and behaviors towards old people, and also their own attitudes, feelings, and behaviors towards their own aging process. This is how I became interested in the field of ageism. I'm going to talk today about the definition of ageism, and we'll try to explain a little bit why it is so pervasive and prevalent in our society. I will then move on to a couple of examples of the manifestations of ageism, really at all levels of society, from the macro level to the meso level, interpersonal relationship, and then to the micro level. Ageism is defined as stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination towards people because of their age. Ageism actually can be either towards old people or young people, or even middle-aged, though usually it is directed towards both old and young. Ageism can be both positive and negative, and it really affects us, as I've already said, at a variety of levels, at the macro-institutional level, in interpersonal relationships, and then at our own perceptions, feelings, and attitudes towards our own aging process. I'm going to talk today primarily about ageism towards old people, and I will be looking at the negative aspects of ageism. Nonetheless, ageism also has some positive aspects, and in this example, I think you can see both the positive and the negative. So you see this person, and you think, oh, that's an old person. You might have negative perceptions of aging, and then you would think that this person is incompetent, weak, unable, burden to society, and you might feel sorry or repelled by this person, and you're not going to sit next to this person. You're not going to associate with this person. On the other hand, you might see the exact same person, yet think that old people are actually kind, wise, smart, warm, and then you might feel attracted or interested in this person, and you might want to hire this person for the job. So this is an example of how ageism can be both positive and negative. Yet it really affects all levels. It affects the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we behave towards people because of their age. I used to show this age pyramid a while ago as a reason for why we should all be focusing on ageism towards old people, as there are more and more old people in society. Nonetheless, a couple of years ago, I showed this age pyramid in my daughter's school when she was in second grade. At that time, I was really worried. Are the kids going to be able to understand the age pyramid or not? Nonetheless, the minute I showed them the age pyramid, they immediately got it. Yet, their first question to me was, how old was I going to be in 2060? This is the first time it really dawned on me that I too will be old at some point. And this attempt to really address ageism and potentially reduce it in society is an attempt that I'm making in order to improve the life that I'm going to live and to improve my own aging process. Unlike the other big isms, sexism and racism, we all have an age. And we're all likely to grow old at some point if we're lucky enough. We're all going to be old at some point. This is why ageism really concerns all of us. We're not all going to be black. We're not all going to be a woman. Yet we all have an age, and it's always affected by stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. And as you grow old, it becomes particularly detrimental to our own aging process. If we look at the research, actually, there has been a lot more interest in racism and sexism compared to ageism, and you can see it here on the left-hand side. On the other hand, if we ask people to report exposure to racism, sexism, or ageism, we see that a lot more people report exposure to ageism a little more than a third of the population reports exposure to ageism, and only 25%, a quarter of the population, reports exposure to sexism, and 17% of the population reports exposure to racism. So we would say that ageism is actually a lot more prevalent than the other two isms, yet it has been understudied compared to the other two. We see the same thing with the World Values Survey, which is a large representative study that included 57 countries, 83,000 people. 60% of the people who were surveyed as part of the World Values Survey stated that older adults are not respected in society. So we would say that ageism is really a very prevalent situation in many, many countries, as you can see here. There are various etiological explanations. There are various ways to try to explain why ageism occurs. And I tried to pick up a couple of explanations at the micro level, at the individual level, at the meso level, the interpersonal level, and then at the macro level, at institutional level. At the micro level, a very prominent theory talks about the terror management, the fear that we have when we see an old person, because it really reminds us that nobody is here in the world forever and that we're all frail. We're all mortal. This is why we try to shed away from old people, because we really do not want to associate with people who remind us of our own vulnerability. At the meso level, we see ageism in the way society is built. Basically, from very early on, our social life is divided based on age. When we go to school, we go with children our own age. When we go to university, we go with people more or less our own age. Same concerns work, and then we retire with people our own age. So our entire social life is divided based on age. And as a result, there is always an in-group and an out-group. And there is very little contact between the two. So it's always going to be me versus them, and there's going to be very little empathy towards people of different age groups. At the macro level, a very prominent theory is the modernization theory. This theory talks about how, over time, young people have moved away to the cities and left the old people behind. Moreover, the knowledge that in the past used to go from father to son, from grandfather to father, and so on, at this point is almost irrelevant because we can find everything over Google at this point, and young people really have an advantage there. So the status of old people has been impaired by modernization processes. Related to this theory, it's interesting to note the futurism, which is a social movement that included many artists and sculptors in the early 20th century in Italy. And they said exactly that. They basically said that now it's time for the youth. Modernity, machine, speed, and old values, old people, anything that is old is really obsolete and should be disregarded and tossed away. So this sentiment of modernity is here, and it's here for quite a long time already. Ageism is really manifested in a variety of contexts, and as I said, at multiple levels, at the institutional level, at the interpersonal level, and then also at the individual level. A very interesting example of how ageism is prominent at the macro policy level can be looked at by examining the UN Declaration of Human Rights that was actually issued 70 years ago. Basically, this declaration says that without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, and so on, there is no discrimination at all based on these various properties. Nonetheless, one category is missing here, and that's age. Up until now, there is still no UN treaty that is the subject of a specific human rights that concerns old people. And that's really a problem, because I think we need a very strong guidance here. Because in many, many countries, and I will give many examples of that, The rights of old people diminish with age. We see it also at the policy level. And many times we're trying to do good, yet the way we speak in policy documents and also in research about old age is in terms of burden. So we would talk about the challenges of aging, about aging as a tsunami. These bring an alarm. These terms are really horrible for us to think of. The same with the idea of the dependency ratio that specifically says that from a certain age onward, people are automatically dependent. The idea of premature death that says that until the age of 70, you could experience premature death. Yet, after the age of 70, there is no way you will experience premature death, no matter what your cause of death is. These concepts, again, put old age in our societal mind as a burden. They portray old age as a disability, as a challenge, as a disadvantage. And these are terms that we should really try to avoid eventually. We also see ageism in politics. And there is a lot of debate now about the global warming. The most prominent representative of the global warming campaign is a 16-year-old in Sweden. When we look at the polls, we really see a divide between young and old. And this divide is emphasized and re-emphasized in major news channels. Same goes for the Brexit. Again, it's young versus old. And whenever you read about the Brexit, you see this division between young and old. I think these debates can be really viewed as a societal divide between young and old. And this divide really brings with it a lot of resentment. The next slide is of a political party called The Party in Germany, which actually says that if people under the 18 cannot vote, then they should really take away the right of old people to vote, because it's impossible that old people will make decisions for the young. So I think there is now a strong sentiment in politics to divide between young and old, and to specifically say that what young people want is the less selfish want, whereas old people are selfish, taking care of their own needs and wishes, and really don't think about the future generations. And this divide really is very, I think, explicitly portrayed in videos presented by this political party. We also see ageism in the way our environment is built, in the built environment. This study was conducted with an urban planner who ended up going into roundabouts, and she took 360 degrees photos of the entire roundabout, documenting who is in the photo and what do they do. Basically, what she saw was that when old people came into these roundabouts, they came there to stay. Nonetheless, most of them did not engage in social interactions. They came, some of them read the newspapers, some of them drank something. They were there for a while with little interaction. Young people, on the other hand, were on the go. When they came to this roundabout, they came on the way somewhere else. The only time that there was an interaction between an old and a young person was when the young person was providing caregiving services to the old person. In the healthcare system, we see ageism in a variety of ways, and it's very, very prominent. This title really, I think, says it very explicitly. Do old people have a duty to die because they consume so much of the healthcare services? Nonetheless, we know that the last year of life is the most expensive year of life. It doesn't really matter if you're 30 or if you're 90. The last year of life is really going to be the most expensive in terms of healthcare expenses. Yet, in the healthcare system, many times, implicitly, we see ageism Without stating that old people have a duty to die, we still see that many times old people are likely to be offered less innovative treatments, less expensive treatment. They are less likely to be consulted with. And we know that in some countries, old people are banned from participating in rehabilitation services. They are less likely to participate even in clinical trials for conditions such as dementia or heart failure that are more common in old age. We also see it by the fact that many healthcare professionals do not want to work with old people. This is why we have a shortage of geriatricians, for instance. Moreover, we know that physicians treat young and old people differently, even for conditions that should have received the same treatment. This study, we basically presented two almost identical stories. The only difference between the stories was the age of the patient. One story was a young person who was experiencing sexual problems with one person, but not with the other. The other story was about an old person, exact same story. Nonetheless, physicians were more likely to diagnose the old person with erectile dysfunction and the young person with performance anxiety. They also had a poorer prognosis for the old person. In terms of explanations, hormonal changes, health problems, and natural decline in desire were more likely to be attributed to the old person compared to the young person. Physicians also offered differential treatments. They were more likely to prescribe Viagra to the old person, whereas the young person was more likely to be referred to sexual therapy. Same goes with social workers. We gave one of almost identical stories to social workers. One was about a young person, the other one was about an old person. The only two differences between the stories was, again, the age of the person. In both cases, it was a woman who was being abused by her husband. Nonetheless, social workers were more likely to say that it was the young woman who was being abused by her husband, and they were more likely to refer the old person elsewhere to law enforcement, and they expressed a wish to provide care to the young woman. We also can put a dollar bill on how expensive age discrimination is in the healthcare system. A recent review has shown that discrimination aimed at old people, negative age stereotypes, as well as negative self-perception of aging can be quantified, and their effect over 1 year is $63 billion. So that's extremely substantial. And I think that it says that ageism is really there in the healthcare system, and it has implications both at the individual level, but obviously also at the financial level of the entire institution. Ageism is extremely prominent also in the workforce, and it starts at a very young age. In some industries, people already at the age of 40 are too old to find a job. And we sometimes see these advertisements looking for people for a dynamic and young company. So they're not saying explicitly that what they're looking for is a young person, yet they're saying our company is young and old people are not welcome. And old can start at a very young age here, even at the age of 40. We know that old people are having a hard time finding a new job. They are more likely to be laid off a job, and they're less likely to be offered training on the job. Another very prominent manifestation of ageism in the workforce is the fact that in many, many countries that at a certain age there is a mandatory retirement age that specifically says that you have to retire after a certain age. This basically says that after a certain age, we have to give our abilities, skills, experience for free and volunteer simply because we have reached a certain age. And I think this is a good example of how old people are doomed if they do and doomed if they don't. Basically, there is this explicit expectation that old people would step aside and pass along because they're blocking the place for the young generations. Nonetheless, the minute they move away from the labor market, they actually become a passive burden on society by consuming too much of our welfare money. So basically, old people here are really in an impossible situation. We also see ageism in the art world. And these are a couple of different galleries that specifically advertise that they're looking for young emerging artists only. And really, these examples show how we associate innovation with age. Nonetheless, we know that there are many artists that started very late in life, and there are many examples for innovation in old age. This has led some of the prestigious prizes to cancel the age limit. We also see ageism in art, and this artist is actually very well known for his sculptures, but if we look at the paintings, I think that it actually gives a quite a bleak outlook on what aging looks like. It definitely looks without color, and it's a little blurry over there in the end. On the other hand, I would claim that Picasso also had a couple of different self-portraits over time, is non-ageist, even though his style has also changed over time. At least to me, his paintings of old age show something that is more abstract and maybe allow more opening, more opportunities, but obviously art is a matter of perspective. Another very well-known artist who actually tried to capture age is Hilma af Klint. Also tried to capture age in her painting. She has a series of 10 paintings called The 10 Largest, where she tried to capture 5 different age periods. I wonder if you could tell me which of these paintings represents old age. The truth is that I was unable to do that, but my students did it very easily. And they said that old age in this painting is really very static, non-dynamic. There is closure compared to the other age periods. To me, the fact that it's so abstract is actually allows more opening and maybe non-ageist. But the mere attempt to capture age is ageist in itself, obviously. We also see ageism in the media. And here we see, I think, the interaction between ageism and sexism. Because it's really never age alone. It's age and something else. So if you are a woman, you should be hiding your age by coloring your hair, by trying to flat your wrinkles. If you're a man, it's okay maybe to age with gray hair and wrinkles, because maybe it brings with it money, power, connections. The problem is that we all really internalize these negative age stereotypes. Had I asked you to think of a witch, you would think of an old witch. Same goes for young children already in 3rd or 5th grade who portray a completely different image when it comes to an old versus a young person. And these images go with us so that when we grow old, we think of ourselves as slow, as a burden to society, as useless. Research has shown that the way we think about our own aging makes a difference. Those individuals who think negatively about their own aging are more likely to fall, more likely to report depression, less likely to recover from various medical conditions, and even are more likely to die before those who think positively about their own aging. I hope I convinced you that we should really change the way we think, feel, and act towards our own aging in order for us to live in a world where age is not a burden, in a world of all ages, where age is not a disability. Thank you.